I never imagined that my life would turn out the way it did, with a woman in her mid-40s standing alone within the walls of a lovely home, shrouded in a pervasive feeling of invisibility. My husband was always away on business trips that lasted days or weeks. When he returned, our conversations hardly ventured beyond the realm of small talk. It had been years since we had shared any kind of intimacy. I kept up a front, cooked, cleaned, and smiled at the neighbors. But inside, I was fading in the gentle embrace of early spring. My husband announced that he would be leaving again, this time for almost a month. I nodded, feigning understanding, but I didn't do that because I felt I had accepted this, or at least I thought I had. Just 1 week after he left, my stepson. When Aiden returned from college for the much anticipated spring break at the age of 22, he stood tall and exuded politeness. He had always kept a respectful distance from me since middle school, so our relationship had always been one of quiet formality. But now there was a change in the way his gaze met mine at first. His compliments, which had once seemed casual, now carried a weight of intimacy. "You look beautiful today," he said one morning in the kitchen. His voice was full of warmth, so I brushed it aside with a laugh, but my heart skipped a beat. Our time together started to grow, mostly because he would help with the groceries, prepare dinner with me, and keep me company. I tried to ignore the growing tension during late-night TV shows, but I was aware of it every time his hand touched mine and every time he lingered a little too close. As the day came to an end, we were sitting on the porch, mesmerized by the breathtaking sunset colors, and he expressed his admiration for the way I kept the family together and acknowledged the strength I showed for his father. I was speechless. It had been years since I had received such praise. There was something in his voice that was gentle yet sincere, and I looked at him and saw more than just my stepson. A man who recognized my existence that night slumber eluded me. I found myself revisiting our dialogues. Time and again his gaze lingered on me, and I found myself rooted in place, convincing myself it was all innocent. Yet beneath the surface, I was acutely aware of the deceit I harbored. I understood that this feeling transcended mere loneliness. I had traversed an emotional boundary that I could no longer ignore upon encountering him once more. The following morning, the sight of his smile stirred a sense of unease within me. I found myself yearning for that attention, that intoxicating sensation of being desired, even if it was misguided after an extended period. I found myself truly awake for the first time, yet a sense of fear lingered within me. I had yet to take any action, but the awareness of my proximity to a pivotal moment loomed large if an intervention didn't occur. Soon I feared I might find it impossible to turn back from the impending storm. It was a Thursday evening when it all unfolded. The silence of the house enveloped everything, and the atmosphere seemed denser than normal. Just as I completed my dinner, the rain began to pour fiercely, accompanied by an abrupt loss of power, in the absence of lights devoid of distractions, and with only the flickering glow of candles to provide warmth. The ambiance transformed, Aiden came into the living room, holding 2 glasses of wine delicately in his hands. He smiled softly, as though he could sense my need, and after a brief pause, I reached for the glass. We remained silent, the only sound being the rain's soft drumming against the windows. The wine made me less defensive. He revealed his thoughts of being a wanderer lately and expressed thanks for the comfort of home and the sense of security he found in my presence as our conversation wound down the hallways of memories that weaved in and out of the tapestry of emotions. The truth enveloped me like a cozy hug, but then he said something that completely stopped me cold. "It looks like you might not really understand how amazing you really are." I looked at him in confusion, but he maintained eye contact. You deserve someone who genuinely understands who you are, he continued. Someone who brings forth the vitality within you. My heart was pounding so hard that I wanted to brush it off and tell him that this was inappropriate, but I held back and let his words seep into my mind. I was craving affection and validation at that moment, and I told him that there were times when I felt like I was fading away inside these walls, as if no one really noticed me anymore. He put his hand towards mine and held it gently, and I didn't want to pull away because it felt so natural and silent, as if we had arrived here not by our own free will, but rather by the unstoppage of fate. After a long time, I finally felt his touch, which was gentle and heartfelt. His gaze went beyond simple observation and lingered on me with an intensity that suggested deeper thoughts and unsaid words. They embraced me, filling the void my husband had long since left behind. He drew closer, and I should have intervened, but I didn't. Our lips met gently and unhurriedly, and the kiss spoke volumes, conveying emotions that words could never express. It was neither chaotic nor hurried. It was profound, brimming with the feelings we had long suppressed. As it came to an end, we lingered in silence. Knowing full well that we had passed a line that could not be crossed, I got up from my chair, said I was going to bed, and left him in quiet. But I was unable to fall asleep. My heart pounded with fervor, my thoughts whirled in a chaotic dance. I was acutely aware of the wrongdoing that lay between us. It transcended the mere act of a kiss. It was an act of treachery not merely of my husband, but of all that I believed I represented, and yet a fragment of my being remained untouched by regret, a fragment of my being stirred, recognized, and caressed in a manner I had long since forgotten. Could exist, words failed me. I had no desire to do so, yet I was acutely aware that everything had irrevocably changed. A transformation stirred within me, something I could never restore the following morning. I steered clear of making eye contact. I navigated the kitchen as if all was well, yet an undeniable shift lingered in the air. Aiden strolled into the room with an air of nonchalance, yet I could sense a shift in his demeanor, calm self, assured as if a boundary had been crossed, and he bore no regrets for it. He extended his assistance for breakfast preparations. I inclined my head, my gaze fixed elsewhere. The unspoken tension that lingered between us was palpable, a force that could not be ignored. We chose to remain silent about the kiss. Neither of us mentioned it, yet it lingered in the atmosphere, a secret too pronounced to overlook. I repeatedly reassured myself that it was merely a fleeting instance, a fragile misstep in discernment. Yet as his hand grazed mine once more, I remained still as he leaned in just behind me to grab a plate. An involuntary response coursed through my body within me. Later that day, I saw him watching me intently, rather than casually, as shame and exhilaration collided like raging waves. Aiden found himself spending more time with the comforts of home rather than his friends. He made excuses to stay close, inviting me to movie nights, running errands with him, and taking leisurely walks. It had been years since I had experienced such a captivating focus, neither from my husband nor from anyone else. I knew the truth, but I couldn't resist the allure of wanting more. As our conversations deepened, he asked about my early years, goals, and the sacrifices I had made over the years. I realized how much I had hidden who I really was in the name of a marriage that gave me no reciprocity, so I tried to set boundaries and told him that this could not continue and that it was reckless and dangerous. He nodded in acknowledgement, took in the words, and even apologized. He found me alone the very next moment, and he whispered that I had been on his mind constantly. He maintained that I was deserving of so much more than to be left by a man who was unaware of my tears as I fell asleep. each word piercing the fabric of my being and mending the frayed edges of my soul. One evening, he caressed my cheek and whispered, "You need not continue the charade. It is acceptable to embrace your emotions once more." I chose not to respond. I found it unnecessary. The glance I cast his way conveyed everything. The boundary of emotion had been irrevocably breached. The events that unfolded were entirely unanticipated. It was bound to happen. I found myself a stranger in my own reflection. I found myself a woman caught in the throes of guilt and longing, balancing loyalty with an insatiable yearning to be desired. I reassured myself that I remained in command, that I could halt this before it spiraled out of control. Yet the reality was that I had already succumbed, and yet I was haunted by the potential repercussions, not merely of being discovered, but of the inevitable moment when he would depart again, when his respite would conclude, and I would find myself solitary in this house. Once more would he embrace this iteration of myself as he departs, or would I find myself shattered once more? This moment born from an irreversible error marked the conclusion of Aiden's break, and the burden of our action started to weigh more heavily on us both. In his moments of silence, it was evident his gaze spoke volumes, yet his words remained unspoken. The weight of our silence now seemed to deepen, pressing down upon us with an unspoken intensity, feeling a sense of guilt. He began to pack his belongings, the intimacy of the moment slipping away with each shirt I folded. I sensed fragments of my delicate world crumbling away. We had indeed crossed a line, but what lies ahead? We never discussed what lay ahead. He made no promises, and I refrained from inquiring. I sought no illusions. I had lived for far too long, cocooned in a false sense of security, with a husband who hardly acknowledged me. But this was different from anything else. It was raw, passionate, misguided, but unquestionably real. And now it had to end. On the eve of his departure, he came to me with a glimmer of uncertainty in his eyes for the first time since it all started. He didn't reach for my hand, instead staring at me as though words were on the tip of his tongue, but remained unsaid. The next morning, as he left, I stayed at the door like a stranger watching someone leave her life without even saying goodbye. No goodbyes, no commitments. I have no regrets whatsoever, and he spoke softly, "But I don't want to disturb your life either." I nodded, becoming speechless, and a constricted sense of uncertainty filled my throat as he left. For a brief moment, the house fell silent again, but there was still a noticeable chill in the air. As the day went on, my husband returned, seemingly unaffected by the passing of time, bringing me mementos of conferences and business talks over dinner. He was unaware of my conscious efforts to avoid his eyes, and he was unaware of the emptiness that had grown inside of me. I had given myself over to another body and soul, but the truth was only apparent to me. At first, I thought that guilt would consume me, but instead I felt a deep sadness for the many years I had lived in the shadows, feeling invisible. The treachery went beyond a simple kiss or a brief touch. It was in realizing that someone who was never supposed to be important had seen me more clearly in a week than my husband had in all those years. Aiden sent a brief message. "Take care of yourself," for hours, thinking about every detail until I finally found the will to erase it. I realized that we couldn't continue, and that I had changed, and that the change was irrevocable. In the end, I found myself in a marriage that seemed complete on the outside, but was completely empty inside. I spent my days with a man who thought everything was fine as I carried the weight of decisions that couldn't be undone, and I found myself unable to get back what had been lost. Perhaps the real punishment isn't being found, but rather enduring the weight of silence that follows. I learned that love without attention turns into a habit, and attention without commitment turns into temptation. In the middle of it all, I lost a piece of myself that will always be out of reach.